Thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my company that I work for the past 21 years, 3M Company. We're an international company, and I've got some facts and figures that we'll go through a little bit, but mostly this is about the journey we've been on and where we are today, and the fact that I truly think the journey never really ends. And I think it's really important to remember in what you're doing on a daily basis is there's almost never a finish line. There are goals that we hit along the way, but there's almost never a finish line. So let's just jump into it. This is our current brand message, our vision. Interestingly enough, it's changing in 2015. I can't tell you because otherwise I have to lock you in here until February. What the new vision is. But essentially 3M, if you don't know, you may be familiar with some of our products, and we've got a few giveaways for questions. You probably know our consumer products and our Scotch brand and Post-it and those kinds of things. If you're in the medical industry, you know a lot about our products that we sell in our healthcare area. But 3M is actually very unique as a manufacturer. First of all, we've got offices in over 200 countries, and we have subsidiaries in over 90. And so we're a very large company. And I'm telling you all of this not because I'm just proud of the company, but also I want you to understand the sort of what we're up to when it comes to DAM and the complexities that we're dealing with. Again, I won't read this slide to you, but a large company. I like to tease that we're a $31 billion company, that if we just get our digital act together, we'd be $62 billion, but that doesn't go over well with my superiors, but I do believe it. One of the things that makes us sort of unique is we have 5 individual big businesses, and we're not supposed to refer to them as big businesses, but they are. And as you can see, consumer, healthcare, electronics, and energy, industrial, which is where we started 113 years ago, I think it was, and safety and graphics. And so literally, when you get up in the morning and you shower and you get ready for work and you get in your car and you drive to work, you've already touched 200 3M products. Okay? You probably don't see them because they're ingredients. For instance, the average American car has over 200 parts that are manufactured by 3M, including the beads that go in your catalytic converter. That's my favorite. Okay? Anybody own a smartphone, touch screen, laptop, any of that kind of stuff? Maybe a tablet, with A or a, yeah, okay. Well, let me just say, you're welcome, okay? That's our technology in there. And we don't blow our own horn very well, but truly, touchscreen technology, a lot of the electronic componentry that goes into these devices today, all the major phone manufacturers, all the major PC, and yes, our friends in Cupertino that we're not supposed to talk about, those parts are coming from 3M, and we help in, basically fuel their innovation and their vision with our products. Just real quick about the area that I'm in. We're in an area that we call eTransformation, and we have 5 pillars of E. User experience, which is mostly about the web, but also about other applications. Content excellence, which is the part I'm about. Social engagement, commerce, and then operational excellence. And it's a group of about 50 people. I concentrate on content excellence, and I just want to make a point here that when you talk about what goes into a DAM or what goes into a PIM, because that's the other part of my job, it's assets and it's investment, okay? And, upper management always wants to know how much money are you going to save me if I invest this amount of money. And what I've started doing the last few years is saying, yeah, I don't know about saving you money, but I'm going to make you money, okay? And that's a much bigger sell, but it makes a lot more sense to the business, right? Because what is every business is in business to actually make money. If you're a nonprofit, well, then it's all about saving in some ways, but it's also about having cash flow that can be used for something else. So I think there's some really good things about the fact that management, at least at 3M, has started to wake up to the fact that things like the web aren't really actually going to go away. They're going to be around for a long time. Just a real quick thoughts stream here, sort of like off the top of my head before we move on. So first of all, what is DAM? Let's be honest, it's just one source of the truth. Okay, we're putting our stuff into a black box, and we're putting enough information with it so we can find it again. And God forbid we're not around, wouldn't it be nice if somebody else could go in that black box and find the same information? Okay, now having said that, Do my people and myself get phone calls saying, I can't find this, but I'm sure it's in there? Yeah, absolutely, we get those phone calls. The needs of the business and the needs for DAM are constantly evolving, and the requirements are always changing or moving forward. And sometimes our vendors come with us, sometimes we lead our vendors. Another thing that I think is really important is business process has got to be tied to that technology. Having the prettiest piece of technology, and I call it the shiny object, right? Because that's what vice presidents like I report to, that's what they like. They like something shiny, and it's new, and the vendor has convinced them it's the greatest thing in the whole world, and they want that. And I'm like, yeah, but without the business process, you've just got an empty database that's very shiny and pretty, but how are you actually going to utilize that? And what's it going to bring to your business? There's always someone who needs to be coached and trained. And I, honest to God, you'd think after all these years that I could say to you, boy, everybody who needs to know how to do this knows how to do this. But the truth of the matter is, there's always somebody, oh, I didn't know we had that system. How does that work? And we put things out there like video training and, copious documentation. But many times, the only way to get them to use it is to actually have somebody sit down with them and work with them, and sometimes do formal training. And if you've done a good job, to most of the organization, you're invisible, okay? And I know it's a hard one, but I really do believe this, and I'm going to show you some examples of that in a few minutes. And obviously, you need great vendors, you need great IT colleagues and support, you need business sponsorship, and the big thing here is you need ownership of the process. Okay, this is not something you can start up and work for a couple of years and then, okay, it's on its own, we've got people using it. You need somebody who's going to nurture the concept in the company and champion it and push it forward. So just a little bit about our journey. We created our first DAM in 1998. I had been a film photographer. I came to work at 3M as a digital photographer because they couldn't get any of the photographers on staff to actually touch a computer. So I quit my own business, was the closest my wife and I ever got to divorce, because she said, you've been working for 12 years to build this business, you're making a decent living, and you want to go to work for this company for less money than you're making now. It's turned out to be the best decision I ever made, so yay me. But we've had 3 generations of DAM. The first one was basically a bespoke system. It was made by our IT colleagues, and we got all of 10,000 photographs into it. Our second one was vendor-based, and we started it in 2001. We launched it, and by the time we moved to our current platform, we had 500,000 assets in it. And the current platform that we're on, we launched in 2012, and in the last 2 years, we've actually doubled the number of assets, and actually we're over 1 million now. By the way, we had a fun little contest. Who's going to be the person to put the 1,000th asset in there? And by the way, we don't count versions. So we have a lot more assets in the system than that, but we only count new documents. We don't count anything as versions. So we're well over the 1,008,000 that was on Tuesday, I think, when I looked. We have 11,100 registered users. We have a total employee population of about 90,000 worldwide. Now, not every one of these people go in and use the DAM every single day, let's be honest. Sometimes they just register and they go in once or twice or maybe 3 times a year. The collection owners, which I'll talk about in a little bit later, what a collection owner is, they tend to be in more often. Where we spend most of our time is we have about 750 power users, and at any given moment, almost 24/7, about 300 of them around the world are in the system, or at least they're logged on, okay? And those are the folks that we really pay attention to and we try to nurture a relationship with. And we literally have to have meetings at 9 o'clock at night with Asia Pac, and we have to do all kinds of crazy things to kind of get some kind of governance going and some kind of a community going around the world. We expect that there's going to be exponential growth because we're now putting videos and 360s, if you're familiar with those, into the database, into the DAM for use. This is just a conceptual view of E at the company, and I won't go into great detail, but I think it's important to understand that we're using the DAM, which you see there is marked as Selim Synergy, but we're using the DAM and Hybris as our PIM, and they are connected together, and that's really important to us, which you'll see in a minute why that's so important to us. We also have a lot of other databases around the world that we have to deal with, and that's at that bottom layer. And all of this is integrated into what we call the product information subject area in a data warehouse at 3M. And so when we play information out on the web or other outputs, they're not actually going against the dam, they're going against this high availability. My friends in IT call it a fortified bathtub. I'm not exactly sure why. That is available 24/7, is got multiple mirrors, and we actually use the ability to feed information around the world from mirrored sites around the world. And we actually pay for that. We don't actually do it on our own. We have an outside vendor we use. Some interesting requirements. With a company this big and as many functions as touch the dam, we have a lot of security and permissions things, and I'm going to give you just a little tiny bit of that information in a minute. Communication of standards and processes is really important. We'll talk about that. We do have this ability to we call it automated linking. It's really more like mandatory linking and documentation of the rights to the assets we put in the system. And this is really, really important for a couple of reasons. First of all, we're an ethical company, and all of you should be an ethical company. I think we all aspire to that. And one of the other things is when you get to be a certain size, or even when you're small, I think, we're in a very litigious society, and so people will sue you at the drop of a hat. And certainly when you're wrong, you have to pay out. And we, a few years ago, discovered that we were paying out on a regular basis for misuse of photography, model releases, that kind of stuff. So we've got very stringent guidelines about how you document in the dam that we own the stuff that goes in there. There's other things like derivatives, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, and reporting I won't talk so much about, but somebody yesterday was talking about you can't get away from spreadsheets, and I will second that. We have a reporting situation within the UI, but the most important reporting we can do is actually coming out in crystal reports into spreadsheets, into Excel. I know everybody hates that, but it is the easiest way for us to say to people, here's the level of your metadata, here's what's missing, here's stuff that we believe needs to be reviewed. And although you can do all that from inside the UI, running those reports out and getting to the right people is many times very important. Again, single source of the truth and output everywhere. So here's where it becomes not easy at 3M. We basically have about 55,000 products across those 5 big businesses. We have about 35 divisions, or smaller businesses, if you will, or operating units. We're doing business as a subsidiary with an office in 93 countries, and they all have a 3M.com presence. We deal with 37 languages globally, and by the way, we've got 2 million SKUs roughly. At any given time, I care about 200,000 of those because that's where our 90% of sales are. So let's first of all talk about security real briefly. We have basically 3 levels of security. We have this public, so when you put an asset in, it goes on the front porch, and until you fill some metadata in, it can't get into the system and get reused anywhere or seen by anybody but you, okay? And so one of the first things you have to decide is this something that's confidential and we're going to have only certain people that will be able to have access to it and see it, or is this something that's public? It can be linked to any website, it can be sent to our distributors, it can be seen by any 3M'er anywhere in the world. The second level of security is what we call private, and it's actually got several different segments to it. But 3M Confidential, Team, or Internal, I won't bore you with the details, but just suffice it to say that sometimes there are things that you would think every 3M'er in the world could see, and it turns out because of your country of residence, we can't actually show you that technical document. I know it sounds dumb, but it's reality, and so we had to build that into the system from a security standpoint. And then, by the way, we don't throw anything away ever. We don't ever nuke anything from the system, and we haven't done that for 10 years. Okay? We archive things, and when we archive things, basically there's only a few people who can see them. The reason we archive everything is for 2 reasons. One is historical. We're a 113-year-old company. We're hoping to be around another 113 years, and when we celebrate that date, we'd like to have some images of us back in the bad old days of 2014. The second thing is, again, unfortunately, from a litigation standpoint, we can't reproduce a web page necessarily in its entirety from 2009, but I can tell you what assets were on that page, what documents were linked to that page, and what photographs were linked to that page in 2009, if I have to. if my lawyer friends come to me and beg me. I can do that. It's not a lot of fun, but with a little sequel you can. The next few are just screenshots of our anonymous websites out there on the World Wide Web, and from several different countries. I think what I want you to see here is all the imagery and the videos that are linked to these pages. These are all coming out of the dam. This is the oldest area of the company, our industrial area. If you can believe it, we sell $11 billion in abrasives and adhesives and tapes. Okay? The good news is the other $20 billion is all the rest of the stuff that we make, so that's good news. I just spent 10 months in depth with this group, bringing them into the 21st century, and it was a lot of fun, and it was also very frustrating. One of my office mates down a row or two has got a big sign on the wall with a big red target and then the words "bang head" here. And I used it quite often, actually, in the last 10 months, but it was still fun. This is our occupational and health area. When you see people running around and they're dealing with catastrophes and they're dealing with volcanoes that have exploded, and you're talking about Ebola, and you're talking about just general safety in a mine, when you're talking, that's what this division does, and it's actually one of the big, fast growers in the company. Again, everything you see on the page that's a document or a video, here's a red circle around a tab where we have technical documents for our dental practice division called ESPI. It's actually a German company that we bought about 10 years ago, and as you can imagine, most of our products are very, very technical, and because of that, we produce tens of thousands of documents. And I'd love to find somebody who can help me teach people not to put them in the PDF form, because they don't work on a phone, okay? But we have about 550,000 documents in the DAM, and most of them are PDFs. And it works great for desktop and tablets, not so great for phones. We generate URLs for derivatives. So all those pictures that you saw obviously came in a bunch of different sizes. What we have people do is put the highest resolution file in. And we have some minimums, and people sometimes, don't do the right thing. But if you put a high resolution image into the system, we generate URLs to a derivative, so that when you link an image to any of our pages that have been templated in our technology stack, essentially all you have to know is the asset ID, or point at it inside of the DAM, if you're in our PIM, and essentially it'll make sure the right size image shows up on the right page in the right window. So this is just an example. As you can see on the screen over on the right-hand side, there's a whole bunch of URLs for different size images from the original. One thing I want to mention about that is we've just recently changed the URLs from nonsense to taking a bit of the metadata and cobbling it together and giving a more human-readable URL. For a lot of years, IT thought that that wasn't a good idea because people might be able to hack our DAM. But now what they're figuring out is that it's worth a lot more from a Google search perspective when people can actually read the URL and say, oh, yep, this is from healthcare at 3M. That might make sense for me to click on that. Because Google does surface documents from your websites as well as your pages. Our homepage has got every bit of documentation we can possibly think of, including links to video training, et cetera. And I'm not as good at this as I should be, but a couple of people who work for me, they tend to send URLs to people when they write with questions in our internal ticketing system, and they've got questions or problems or whatever. If it's been documented and it's in, by the way, in the database, we surface those URLs on this page, and they generally send them right to the URL of the page that they need to look at to understand the concepts. Here's an example of a document on the proper use of using stock imagery. And we actually have a unique contracted relationship with Getty and 4 other stock photography houses because they were constantly suing us for misuse, okay? Somebody would buy a photograph for use, for one-time use, or in one country but not 18 other countries, and the next thing you know, this thing would be on all those other countries' websites. And it's an easy thing for them to scan and then say, by the way, you owe us X amount of dollars, which added up very quickly. So what we have done is we've said, you know what, we're going to cut some advantageous for you, advantageous for us contracts, And by the way, every time we ingest something, and it's only ingested by people on my team, into the dam, we make sure all the rights are spelled out and the documentation is linked to it. This happens to be a document on copyright. I was a photographer in a former life, and I believe one of the things we shouldn't do is we should not cheat our artistic community. So there's a lot of talk about what rights are you buying as a corporation. You are buying one-time rights unless the photographer or the artist or the designer tells you something differently in writing. And so one of the things that we do is we have a little 3-page, this is everything you need to know about copyright. This is who your local counsel is in your country. This is who you should talk to. We suggest you use sourcing when you work with outside vendors, and that you adhere to 3M guidelines to this, so that we do this ethically. Again, we want to make sure that any photography that goes in, we actually own all rights, and this document spells that out. We have these automatic relationships that I talked about before, or I'm going to call them mandatory. Nobody else gets to see this when you put it in the dam unless you fill out the following fields. And one of those things is, you know, if it's a photograph of a person, do we have the model release on file? If it's a piece of property, do we have a release from the owner of that property? One of my favorites is when salespeople go out and they take pictures of McDonald's and Target and other iconic brands' buildings, because a lot of that light display stuff that you see in the signage is 3M. Well, it's not owned by us, right? It's owned by Target, it's owned by SA, it's owned by whoever. And so unless somebody high up in their company explicitly says that we can use that imagery, we can't use it. And so this stops them dead in their tracks. They can put it in the dam, but it can't be utilized unless a model release or a property release has been linked to it. Here's an example of an image of a young girl, and obviously we want to use that properly. We want to make sure the model release is available. If you click on the tab that you see highlighted there that says asset relation, you'll see that not only is it showing you a little thumbnail of the actual model release, it's also showing you all, and it's only showing 2 right now, but it's actually going to show you all the other images that are part of that model release. So we connect all that together, and it's literally a drag and drop, right? We try to make this as simple as possible for our users. One of the things is I believe that you need to make sure that the information that goes into the dam, that's great if you get it in, but if you can reuse it, it's even better, right? And so we try to make it ubiquitous within the company. You saw examples of all the documents and photographs and video that we hook up to our public websites. This is an internal, our intranet, and it turns out that, I wonder how we did that. We actually use Google, and we actually let you search and find any photograph within the Google search on our intranet that is public. Now, if you can imagine, if you type in posted or Scotch, you're going to get way too many to wade through, right? But if you are a little bit better with your search criteria, you will have access to photographs directly out of the intranet. And by the way, if you have the permissions, you can actually download the high res, or at least get the low res if you want to. That's one way that we make it easy for people. Here's an example. We have customer service reps and technical service reps who are on the phone, unfortunately, quite often with customers, and they're looking for a technical answer. Our knowledge base actually scans all of the documents that are inside of the dam. We also provide question and answer type XML snippets for commonly asked questions about our products. And what we encourage the people who do this knowledge work, the CSRs and TSRs, is if the answer isn't a technical document, there's a way in the knowledge base to say this asset in the document, this paragraph, or this line, or this table. And so what you'll see, and it's kind of hard to see on this screenshot, is they can search everything, including internal documents and things that are for internal use only, if they're looking for an answer, which is great if you happen to be talking to a 3M'er. If you're outside on the World Wide Web and you've got a question, you can go against the same knowledge base, but you are only going to have the things shown to you that are public. And so you'll get less answers, and this is actually the same basic question, and you can see there's only 2 documents showing up here, whereas in the last snapshot, I think there was 18 or something like that. Here's a fun one. I love this one. This is one that's been around for a long time. if you can imagine, we move a lot of imagery to our channel partners and to our vendors on a regular basis, and they may not have access directly to the dam. So we have this ability to create collections, where you as a modifier or a collection owner, you can go into the dam, you can create any kind of a collection with anything that you have access to, private, confidential, or public, and you can create essentially an album of it. And then the system will generate a URL instantaneously that you can send off to somebody, and then they get a page out on the World Wide Web with those images so that they can download them, as well as see some of the metadata. Now, if there are confidential information in that collection, and the system will detect that there is, it'll ask you if you want to log in. If you don't have credentials to log in, or you do have credentials and you log in but you don't have the correct permissions, you will not see the things that are supposed to be hidden from you. This does cause a little bit of inflammation sometimes because people are like, well, I sent them 20 photographs but they can only see 18. Right, but 2 of them are in archive, or 2 of them are in confidential. They have to be in the right security group to see that. This is probably the thing I'm the most happy about in the last year, is video has been a wild, wild west at 3M for a lot of years. We are now ingesting video into the dam, and we're going to use the same kind of criteria around model releases and property releases, et cetera. And we are able, within the dam, to ingest the video and the metadata that's needed, and then we can syndicate it to either Brightcove or to YouTube or both, and any channel that we have. As part of that, the system lets us pick the keyframe that we want to have show up on YouTube or on Brightcove, and then I think this next one shows you when it's been ingested, which generally takes about 20 minutes in the syndicated system, it sends back a URL to Selim that basically says, yep, it was successful, here's a URL. If you're paranoid, you can click on it and you can see that it's coming from YouTube or wherever. Now, this is my favorite. So 3M, it's a big company, a lot of innovative people. We have hundreds of YouTube channels around the world. And so there was no way that we could basically say, well, you're all going to syndicate to one channel in YouTube. And so there is a little bit of work that has to happen on the modifier side, which is you need to know how to log into the channel on YouTube that you're going to syndicate to. By the way, this is my other favorite part, and it's true of everything that we do in the dam. If I turn it off in the dam, it kills the URL on the outside of the company. In the case of YouTube, it actually nukes it. In the case of Brightcove, it actually just turns it off and archives it in Brightcove. So that's a really important part to me, right? What you're doing with the dam is you're protecting the corporation along with saving the money, making the money. And one of the things you can do is make sure that when somebody says this is obsolete or it's wrong or it's no longer relevant or whatever the reasoning is, when you turn it off in the dam, it gets turned off everywhere else that it gets used. By the way, who knew? The lawyers and I get along really well. Here's another YouTube channel. I guess I don't have a snapshot of the Brightcove channel, but that gives you some idea of how we syndicate video. Now, my last slide is a reiteration of what we saw earlier on, and I just want to hit a couple of points again really fast. First of all, the journey's never over, right? And perfection never happens. Whenever you're talking about any more than 2 people, you're never going to get perfection for everybody. And so we're constantly going through requirements and trying to understand from an overall corporate standpoint, what are the requirements we have to fulfill with the dam? And how are we going to weigh that? And a number of years ago, one of our CEOs brought in Six Sigma. And to be honest, I kind of hated the whole Six Sigma thing in some ways. I've turned into a data geek since then, right? So don't make a decision unless it's data driven. And so I drive my team and I drive my constituents and my stakeholders to, don't use your gut, let's use the data, and then let's make a decision of what we're going to invest in. And anybody who knows me, they would know that when I started at 3M, well, I had a beard back then, but I shaved it off for a while, but it was completely brown and I had a ponytail, okay? So I was a different guy 20 years ago than I am now, but it's got to be data-driven decisions. You can't be the person who's the loudest one in the room, the one with the most emotion. It's got to be weighed and measured, and how are you going to invest in this? Because a dollar here or a dollar there adds up very quickly. And if you put something into the dam functionality-wise that nobody uses, or only one person uses, it's not really a good investment. And if you've done a good job, it's everywhere, and yet nobody knows where it's coming from. One of my favorite things is, once in a great while, we actually shut the dam down for a few hours for different kinds of maintenance things. And so these notices go out, and in the notices it says in big letters, you won't be able to enter the dam, but don't worry, all of your content on the websites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are going to continue to work. You just can't go into the dam and do anything. I cannot tell you how many phone calls I get, oh my God, what's going to happen to my website, right? They don't read the whole email. But you really realize when you send that kind of stuff out that it's really important to people. And in fact, one of the things that I've done is work with a friend of mine who's really into analytics. And we came up with some numbers that we handed to management that said, if the dam goes down and there is not this content on the websites, what does that cost 3M? And I could maybe actually spend a whole hour talking about this sometimes, David, just in case you're wondering. We decided it would cost the company $75,000 an hour if the materials that are in our dam are not accessible on the World Wide Web and the extranets. That's a pretty good story to tell upper management. It's up to you, right? $75,000 an hour, you know, it's a $31 billion corporation. It'll show up eventually, right? But they'll look at you like, well, how did you figure that out? And I have this huge presentation, and it was a great bit of work, that, and I give it all the credit to my friend David Michelson, because he basically said, I'm going to be as conservative as I can be. But in a company this size, if people can't see an image of the product, they're not going to buy it. Okay? And he went through all of our extranet sites where we sell directly to distributors and to retailers, and he said if all this stuff goes down and the technical information isn't there, 75 grand an hour. How long do you want it to be down for? So, with that, I'm going to basically get off my soapbox.
Let's all join me in thanking John and giving him a good send-off for his trip back to the Florida Eagle.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.